George Gopen here. We return to the first movement of T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. We left off, let me get you the text up here. We left off at this passage. Only there is shadow under this red rock. Come in under the shadow of this red rock, and I will show you something different from either your shadow at morning striding behind you, or your shadow at evening rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. What a way to talk about a human being as a handful of dust. And then there is a break between stanzagraphs, my word for poetical paragraphs. There is a break visually, and we get German. And the German is just down the middle of the page. And if you recognize the German, which not many people will, you will know that that is to be sung because it comes from a Wagner opera. Then we get a scene, just 7 lines, with a guy and a gal coming back from a hyacinth garden where they'd had a moment that was somehow spectacular. And then we get German again, Öd und leer das Meer. Now, if you don't know German, you can't even read it. And Eliot doesn't translate it for you, which he should have. And he might have done well to tell us where it comes from, because both of these quotes come from Wagner's great love story, Tristan und Isolde, the greatest love story ever told, maybe the longest love story ever told, too. It's well over 5 hours as an opera. So let me, with Wagner in mind, give you this whole passage. And I will show you something different from either your shadow at morning striding behind you, or your shadow at evening rising to meet you. I will show you fear in a handful of dust. Frisch weht der Wind der Heimat zu, mein irisch Kind, verweilest du. You gave me hyacinths first a year ago. They called me the hyacinth girl. Yet, when we came back late from the hyacinth garden, your arms full and your hair wet, I could not speak, and my eyes failed. I was neither living nor dead, and I knew nothing. Looking into the heart of light, the silence. Öd und leer das Meer. What's going on here? Well, Eliot is indulging in a technique which he uses several times in this poem that I call bookending. He gives you Wagner at the beginning of the scene, then the scene, and then Wagner at the end of the scene. So you have Wagnerian bookends. How do they function? Wagner's opera begins with Isolde on a boat being carried by Tristan and his men to Cornwall, where she, as the booty of war, as the war prize, is going to marry the somewhat aged King Mark, Tristan's uncle. And a sailor sings this nasty little song quoted here at the beginning. Sailor sings a song that says, "Wind is blowing, my Irish child, how you doing?" Not nice. We then have almost over 5 hours of opera, in which Isolde, having decided to kill Tristan, getting her maid in waiting to mix up who's a witch, a magic potion that will kill Tristan. And she's gonna die too, she's gonna drink it too. But Brangena, her faithful servant, the witch, makes a magical love potion instead. They both drink the love potion, fall madly in love just as the ship is pulling into port. And we have a huge Act 2 in which they're furiously trying to get together. They do get together, and we build up to a climax of love that is just astonishing over a long period of time. And just when connection is to be made, a horrible chord, and in walks King Mark, who's been tipped off by the villain in the piece that they are meeting when he's supposedly off hunting. He sings a 20-minute rebuke of the two of them. And at the end of Act 2, the villain draws a sword on Tristan. They go to fight with each other. Tristan lowers his sword, and the villain skewers him and kills him. However, it takes him all of Act 3 to die. Act 3 is very long. Final act. Here he is on a mountaintop somewhere, at least a hilltop. And the stories all come out, and everybody understands what's really happened. And King Mark has forgiven everybody, and Tristan is dying. So Mark has sent Isolde to go to Tristan so he can see her before he dies. She's coming by ship. And Tristan knows she's coming, and he's anxious for her arrival because how long's he gonna last? And he asks this little shepherd boy to keep a lookout. So the shepherd boy is up there watching the sea, seeing where the ship is if it comes. And Tristan says, "What do you see out there?" And the boy says, "Don't leave das Meer." Empty and wasted is the sea. A wasteland of water. The wasteland in this poem is usually dry, cracked, brown earth that's lacking water. But here we have a wasteland made up of water. So we have the beginning of the love story and the end of the love story, both on water, and in between we have this scene, this photograph of a loving couple once again, a Tristan and Isolde, but this time in modern day. Let us go back and look at that scene. Now it's a little tricky in this poem, knowing who's talking when. And you can think of every character as he or she comes on stage as new. It works. You can think of them all, the women as one character, all the men as one character, and they just kind of put on different costumes, if you will. That works too. But it's hard sometimes to tell who's speaking. Now, when you see my cursor circling the quotation marks, when you have quotation marks opening up a quote, it doesn't end until you find ending quotation marks. So if you get quotation marks at the beginning of the next line, it means this speaker is still speaking, and she speaks until the quotation marks at the end of that line. Then when the man starts speaking, he didn't get quotation marks. This was supposed to clarify and distinguish the man from the woman. I always find it very confusing. It took me a long time to figure that out. That's why I tell you about it. She says, they gave me hyacinths. Beautiful flower. First, a year ago. This is the most blooming thing we've seen in the poem so far, or are likely to. They called me the hyacinth girl. Now, they've just been to a hyacinth garden. He's given her hyacinths again. They've been going together for a year at least. And he says, yet when we came back late, oh, it's been a lot of time from the hyacinth garden, your arms full of stuff, your hair wet. Wetness is what's lacking in this poem, and it's a sign of fecundity. It's a sign of sexual pleasure. It's a sign of procreativity. It's a sign of how the wasteland will come back to life in the spring if we only can get some water. Your arms full and your hair wet, I could not speak. Now you see the enjambement, you can't stop at I could not. Can't read this line. Your arms full and your hair wet, I could not. Speak and my eyes failed. Sorry. Poetry insists that you go from one line to the next without stopping. That is enjambement. E-N-J-A-M-B-E-M-E-N-T. Jambe is the French word for leg. It's you're walking from one line straight to the other. I could not speak. And do you hear how the poetry stumbles because of that enjambment? I could not speak. And my eyes failed. So he's blind. Anybody else blind in this poem? Tiresias, the prophet, the seer, coming up in movement 3, is blind. He's the one who is a combination of all the men and all the women of this poem, according to T.S. Eliot's note. Could not speak, and my eyes failed. I was neither living nor dead, and I knew nothing. Not has an N. Neither has an N. They both end lines. They're both negatives. Nor comes along 2 words later. And then you get new with an N sound and nothing. Those N's cascade. You don't particularly hear them, but they're glue that holds it together. I could not speak and my eyes failed. I was neither living nor dead, and I knew nothing. Looking into the heart of light, looking at light, the L's talk to each other. The silence. Silence is lack of sound. It's nothing. Du leer, looking, light, L's. Das Meer, leer, and mehr. So lots of sound repetition. Eliot's alluding to Wagner. Now, if you don't know those lines of Wagner, they're just German. They're a little annoying. They begin and end. They do a book-ending kind of thing, even if you don't know what they are. But if you do know what they are, they bring richness into the poem. It's not just I'm quoting Wagner. If you're really educated, you'll know Wagner, and you and I will have a connection to each other. Nope. If you go with Eliot's allusions to the source of the illusion, you find what's going on there, and you grasp it and bring it back to this part of the poem. If it enriches that part of the poem, this is a brilliant use of allusion. And here we have a greatest love story ever told. Classic love story. And all we have left of that. in the wasteland. And this is a great moment. This is a wet moment. A little bit of wistfulness because this guy was not able to speak, not able to express himself. Wagner speaks for 5 to 6 hours about this love story. And this guy, he just couldn't say anything. Now I hear another allusion here. And it's in a single word. Who's the other favorite person that Eliot loves to allude to so far? And coming up in the future too. Shakespeare. Shakespeare and the word nothing. A significant relationship. Hold on one moment. Gotta go get my Shakespeare text. You didn't have to wait long, did you? Got my text. Well, you didn't have to wait long, but I have my text. The word nothing's very special to Shakespeare. Most often when he uses it, it means something instead of nothing. And the person hearing it is abused by his or her understanding of it, misunderstanding of it. And the two most remarkable juxtaposed examples of this come in the first act of King Lear. King Lear is an elderly king, and he's looking to kind of retire and relax and have a good time and not have to run the country anymore. He's not supposed to do. He's born to be king, supposed to be king. So he divides the country up into 3 sections to give to his 3 daughters so that they will reign in his place. He's got a map. Everybody can see the map. And he brings the 3 daughters into court and he says, okay, each of you is going to get a portion. What can you say to get yourself a really good portion? And he calls upon his eldest daughter, Goneril, and she says, oh, dearer than eyesight, you are number 1 in my life. He says, terrific, honey, and says, you get this third. And then he says, Reagan, my second born, what do you have to say? And Reagan says, I double everything she says. I one up everything she did. He says, terrific, you get this third. Now one can see that the best third is still left. And he turns to his youngest, whom he loves best, says, and you, Cordelia, what can you say to get a third more opulent than your sisters? Now the 2 sisters are really some of the nastiest characters in all of literature. Goneril is horrifying and Reagan outdoes her. Cordelia, the heart of the lion, Cordelia, is a sweetheart. And when he says, what can you say to get a better third than your sisters? There's some silence and she says, nothing. He says, nothing. She says, nothing. He says, nothing can come of nothing. Speak again. And she explains that she can't talk false like her sisters. She has true feeling for him, but when she gets married, her husband will carry half of her love and half of her loyalty. And Lear goes bonkers and disinherits her, and the whole play goes downhill from there. The very next scene, we get a subplot. The Earl of Gloucester is an ancient man, older even than Lear. He's got 2 sons. Guess what? A bad elder one and a wonderful younger one. And the elder one, who's illegitimate, wants to get rid of the younger one so that he can take over. So he forges a letter from the younger, supposedly from the younger one, saying how he's going to kill his father. And when father walks into the room with the bad guy, he hides the letter behind his back. And Gloucester says, "What do you got there?" Edmund says, "Nothing." Says, "Why the haste to hide it behind your back like that?" "No, it's nothing." "Come, come," says Gloucester, "if it be nothing, I shall not need spectacles." He takes the paper and reads it and turns against his wonderful younger child in favor of the older, nasty child. But there is a place at the end of Shakespeare's career, he uses it a great deal, where he brings it to a climax, his use of the word nothing. It's in The Winter's Tale, not as much read as most other Shakespeare plays, a magnificent play. Kind of quirky, and it's magic. People have trouble with the magic. But Leontes, the king, is married to this wonderful lady, Hermione, true and lovely lady. He brings his old boyhood friend to Bohemia, where he rules, for the better part of a year, 9 months. And Leontes gets it in his head that his wife is having an affair with his friend. And he can't get it out of his mind. And scene comes, two are there, very kind to each other, nice to each other. They walk off to the corner and chat together. And Leontes, the jealous king, calls his trusted servant and advisor Camilla to him and says, he has such trouble saying the word. When you say a word, it creates something. It's the only way human beings can create, is by naming. And if you have to call your wife something terrible, and it's hard for you to do so, you interrupt the syntax so you don't get to it too quickly. That's what he does. Camillo, have you not seen? But that's passed out. You have, or your eyeglass is thicker than a cuckold's horn. Or heard, for to a vision so apparent, rumor cannot be mute. Or thought, for cogitation resides not in that man that does not think. My wife is slippery. What a hard word. If thou wilt confess, or else be impudently negative to have no eyes, nor ears, nor thought, then say my wife's a hobby horse. Blah, blah, blah. Camilla says, I would not be a stander by to hear my sovereign mistress clouded so without taking action if it weren't you. And Leontes explodes, is whispering nothing, is leaning cheek to cheek, is meeting noses, kissing with inside lip, stopping the career of laughter with a sigh, a note infallible of breaking honesty, horsing foot on foot, skulking in corners, wishing clocks more swift, hours, minutes, noon, midnight, and all eyes that would unseen be wicked. Is this nothing? Why, then the world and all that's in it is nothing. The covering sky is nothing. Bohemia, nothing. My wife is nothing, nor nothing have these nothings, if this be. That's after a whole career of using it here and there. When you get to know lots of Shakespeare, it's a word that reverberates. And therefore, if Eliot uses it at significant moments of stress positions, the end of a line, the end of a sentence, the end of a stanza graph, those are all stress positions. If he uses it in double or triple stress positions, an end of a sentence at an end of a line, it reverberates So we go back. I was neither living nor dead, and I knew nothing. Looking into the heart of light, you may hear a reference there to Conrad's horrible novella, The Heart of Darkness, published just a few years before this. The silence, the lack of sound, nothing, not, neither, nothing, silence. And then comes this quiet line, empty and wasted is the sea. And that's the end of a stanza graph. There is a break in space. And what do we get? Madame Sophocles, famous clairvoyante, had a bad cold. Nevertheless, is known to be the wisest woman in Europe with a witted pack of cards. What a change of tune, what a change of key, what a change of tempo. What a change. We go from Tristan and Isolde and a magician there, Brangena, a handmaiden, to Isolde, to a different magic lady, Madame Sosostris. Now, Wagner's operas function by a system he pretty much invented, which he called leitmotifs. That's Leitmotif, leitmotifs. That is, he would assign to a certain feeling or concept or item a few notes as a kind of named tune that calls it. He has a tune for grief. He has a tune for greed. He has a tune for gold and the danger of it. He's a tune for all these in their tiny little things, just a few notes. And they recur over and over and over again. Although Wagner's operas are very, very long, there's huge amount of repetition in there. And if you can hear the gold from over there and the greed from over here come together because gold and greed motifs are played next to each other, things are happening. It's kind of Wagner alluding to himself, alluding to other parts of this work. And Eliot's moved by that and does it. He's also trying to imitate another giant. We got Shakespeare, we got Wagner, we had Chaucer to start with, but the third giant is Beethoven. Now you may say you don't hear any Beethoven in all this poem. Eliot was very much taken with late Beethoven. Beethoven had an early period where he sounded like Haydn and Mozart before him, but breaking more rules. He had a middle period where he went on and did things that nobody else had done, and then he had a late period, which is so ethereal, is so astonishing, that no one's been able to reproduce it. It's unique in the history of music, and it gives us some of the greatest music ever written, including his Ninth Symphony, including his latest piano sonatas, and especially including his late string quartets. Eliot was really taken with the light string quartets, and they did, within an instrumental form, something like Wagner did. Wagner got it from Beethoven and took it a step further. He didn't have a leitmotif that meant a certain thing, but he had a little motion in music, which would come back and back and back in different forms, upside down, backwards, slower, faster, at halftime down here, while something else is brocading up there. And we get Madame Sosostris here as a leitmotif, as a repeated fragment in late Beethoven. How do I know Eliot was so interested in late Beethoven? Because he published in an essay a statement that he wanted to do for poetry what Beethoven did for music in his late period. What does that mean? Well, we have a recurrent leitmotif that is also a recurrent theme in this poem of people who can see the future. We have Madame Sosostris here. She's the almost comic version. She's the fortune teller. But we're going to have in the third movement Tiresias, the blind seer, who can see the future because the gods have given him that ability. It was a kind of, sick joke. One god blinded him for not agreeing with her in an argument. And the other god said, well, maybe blind, but I'll let you see everything. But we started the poem with the Sibyl of Cumae. Remember her? You go to the cave. She has endless life. She was stupid enough to ask for it. And she got given it by God. And she shrunk and shrunk and shrunk over the years, and she's a bunch of pain. She wants to die, but she can't. So the young men come to her and say, Sibyl, what do you want? She says, I want to die. And that's how the wasteland starts. Now, when you went to the Sibyl, I'll remind you, you asked her your question, and she lived in a cave, and you go to the beginning of the cave, and you shout out your question, and you withdraw. She gets out of the little cage that she hangs in to protect her from wild animals, tiny little thing, and she writes your fortune cookie with one word on each palm leaf, and takes the palm leaves out to the front of the cave, lays them all down in the proper order. And she disappears, you come up and you can read your future, but before you do, the ring comes up, the leaves fly away, and you can collect all the leaves, but the order you put them in is your choice. It's an interpretation on your part. Then things fall apart from you, and you go back to the Sibyl and say, you lied. She said, well, let's see it. She brings out your leaves, says, what'd you do with these? You put them in order. And she says, no. And she changes the order, and it means completely differently. Shortly after that, as we get into the poem, we find, Son of Man, you know only a heap of broken fragments. Heap. Said that exactly right. Heap of broken images. Thought I had a moment. Heap of broken images. They are fragments. What do you do with a heap of broken images? All of Europe is a heap of broken images after World War I. Well, you try to make sense of the shards. And here you have Madame Sosostris dealing out the cards of a tarot pack. A tarot pack, T-A-R-O-T. Look it up if you don't know about it. It's easy to find. People play card games with them, but fortune tellers use them to tell fortunes. They would deal out the cards face down, and then you'd have a card, and then pick up each card, and she would say, oh, the relationship of this to you is thus and so on. Oh, here's this card, and it means in your context such and such, and do a card reading for you. So Madame Sosostris does a card reading for who? Who is this person who's seeing Madame Sosostris? Is it Marie? Is it doesn't matter? It's a person. Madame Sosostre's famous clairvoyante had a bad cold. Could you be more unpoetic than to mention that this famous clairvoyante, famous for seeing the future, can't handle her own life any better than anybody else because she, like everybody else, has a bad cold. So we have a picture of her sniveling, doing this card reading. Nevertheless, despite the fact that she's human and can get colds, is known to be the wisest woman in Europe with a wicked pack of cards. Now look at the rhyme scheme. Clairvoyant, nevertheless, Europe cards. There's no rhyme. So he's thrown out rhyme, and the lines are kind of different lengths. Madame Sosostre's famous clairvoyant, 5 beats, had a bad cold, nevertheless, maybe 5 beats, or had a bad cold, nevertheless, could be 3, is known to be the wisest woman in Europe, 5, with a wicked pack of cards, 3, maybe it's 5, 3, 5, 3. You can't hear it though, but it's got that alliterative quality going on. Wisest woman with wicked, 4 W's in 7 words. Bad cold, pack of cards, bad pack, cold cards. The sounds, they trip over each other. So he's retaining poetry and he's getting rid of poetry. It's as if he was picking up fragments of poetic use. Here, said she, is your card, the drowned Phoenician sailor. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Look, here is Belladonna, the lady of the rocks, the lady of situations. Here is the man with 3 staves, and here the wheel. These are all cards she's turning over. And here is the one-eyed merchant, and this card, which is blank, is something he carries on his back, which I am forbidden to see. I do not find the hanged man. Fear death by water. Let's go back and see what these cards are that she is presenting to us. Here's your card, the card I picked out of the deck. Pick a card, pick any card. That's your card. It's the drowned Phoenician sailor. Now, the Phoenicians were the great merchants of the ancient world. Phoenicia was where Israel and Syria and Lebanon are today. And it just bred a whole bunch of sailors who sailed halfway around the world. They were absolutely remarkable. But of course, if you're a sailor, death by water is something you should fear. We're going to have a Smyrna merchant later on. Smyrna being modern day Phoenicia, and merchant, the sailors were merchants. The drowned Phoenician sailor, those are pearls that were his eyes. Look. Do you recognize those are pearls that were his eyes? If you don't, it's okay, the line still functions. You've got a drowned Phoenician sailor, and you've got where his eyes were. Well, if they're not there anymore, you've got eye sockets. And what's there? A pearl. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Something extraordinary, something rich has supplanted the eye in the empty eye socket. You recognize the quote, all sorts of extra things happen. They're really quite wonderful. It's, guess who? Shakespeare. His last full play, The Tempest. Story of Prospero, the magician, who was a duke and had his country stolen from him by his brother. And he got set into a boat with his baby daughter, supposedly going to perish. Boat pushed out to sea, sort of like The drowned fertility god? Well, he winds up, he's a magician. He winds up on an island. He lives there with his daughter and with a slave, Caliban, who's a real sexual threat, and Ariel, who is an aerial spirit who does Prospero's bidding. And his brother and some other bad guys from the old land come close enough to the island to be in his power. He creates a magical storm, and it looks like everybody's drowned, but they haven't. They all wash up on the shore in different groups. They can't see each other. Nobody knows anybody else has survived. And one group is a single person, Ferdinand, the son of the king, and he is eventually going to wind up marrying Prospero's daughter. So it's got to come out okay. But he thinks his father and his brother have been drowned. He winds up on the sand and he's very upset. It looks like he's the only one who survived. And suddenly, he hears a voice singing. It's Ariel, only Ariel is invisible. Shakespeare had music in 36 of his 37 plays. Of all that, we only have 5 songs that we know are original to his time. And this song is one of those original 5. Ferdinand hears Ariel sing the following text. Full fathom 5, thy father lies, of his bones are coral made, those are pearls that were his eyes, nothing of him that doth fade, but doth suffer a sea change into something rich and strange. Sea nymphs hardly ring his knell, hark, now I hear them, hark, now I hear them, ding dong bell. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Of his bones are coral made as the human being falls apart. The corpse is translated, transmuted, transmogrified, transformed into something rich and strange. Those are pearls that were his eyes. Look! What an ironic syllable. Look! Doesn't have eyes anymore. And you look, look at the pearls that were his eyes. Belladonna, the Lady of the Rocks. Belladonna, poisonous plant. Lady of the Rocks, come in under the shadow of this red rock. Do you see how these little motifs come back? Or Beethovenian morsels that get reprised. The Lady of Situations. We have lots of ladies in a bunch of situations. In this poem, in the third movement, we will have 3 such. We'll have others even before that. The man with 3 staves, Eliot tells us, he associates just arbitrarily with the Fisher King. There's no reason we would look at the 3 staves man and think that, but Eliot says it in his note, so we can take it into account. The Fisher King, who's that? King Amfortas, who, because of, guess what, sexual sin, is wounded by a spear and is sick unto death, but is having trouble dying. And it becomes clear that he will only recover only recover if someone who is completely pure and without sin, especially sexual sin, can find him and by interacting with him, allow him to be forgiven and be repaired. Well, some of Sir Arthur's Round Table Knights who are pure go off in search of the Holy Grail, and one of them, Sir Percival. Sir Percival comes across Amfortas and is able to cure him. Nice. Now, Percival, when translated into German, becomes Parsifal. And that is Wagner's, there he is again, last and longest opera. Tells the Amfortas Parsifal story at great length. So here we have the man with three staves is the wounded king suffering because of sexual sin. And here the wheel, that's the wheel of fortune. And here is the one-eyed merchant. Who's the one-eyed merchant? Well, we already have the Phoenician sailor who's kind of merchant, but this is a different one-eyed merchant. And one-eyed suggests something else from Wagner. In Wagner's Ring Cycle, those 4 long operas, the King of the Gods plays a prominent part in all 4. His name is Wotan. In Scandinavia, he would be called Odin. And Wotan, in order to become superior to all the other gods, seeks out Mother Earth, Erde, who has all of knowledge. And he says, what do I have to do to get all of your knowledge? I want to be king of the whole world, and I need to know what you know. She says, oh, I'll tell you. It'll take some time. 3 days. But in order to learn it, you have to suffer. So you have to hang on that tree for 3 days. Know any other gods who hang on trees for 3 days? And it'll cost you an eye. So he has to give up an eye to get the knowledge. And as a result, he wears an eye patch. So he's the one-eyed merchant, even though he's not selling anything. The one-eyed bring him to mind. And this card, which is blank, is something he carries on his back, which I am forbidden to see. This will recur in the poem later as well. Something that you look at, and you want to know, but you can't see it, can't quite tell it. It's a third person in a journey. It seems to be a third person next to you, but every time I look to see, it's not there. I do not find the hanged man. You got the one-eyed merchant and the hanged man. Fear death by water. Now, how ironic is it that in the wasteland, which is wasted because there isn't enough water, that we should fear death by water, which sailors and merchants on the sea must be aware of. Those are pearls that were in his eyes. Look. Well, I see crowds of people walking round in a ring. Eliot's note tells us this is an allusion to the last of the great giants in this poem, Dante. Dante's going to show up a number of times, a favorite of Eliot's. Dante wrote the Inferno and terrestrial poem and a paradisial poem to go along with it. In the Inferno, the poet Virgil is taken, Dante is taken on a tour of the 9 circles of hell by the poet Virgil. They stop and talk with people along the way. And there are lines from the Inferno that make their way into the wasteland. Crowds of people walking around in a circle. They'll be back soon. This is something else she sees in her prediction. And then there's a strange line. Thank you. What in the world is she thanking this other person for? The reading is over. It's time to pay the piper. Reading is over. Don't see the hangman. Fear death by water, my advice. See crowds of people walking around in a circle. Circles fail. Okay, buddy, that's it. Your time's up. Hands over the payment. She says, thank you. Now, how do I know this? I don't know this. Was I there? There's no there there. This is a fictional scene. All that exists of it is what we see on the page. There is no more to it. Does it make sense that that's what happens at this moment? Yes. Does it help bring that moment to an end? Yes. Thank you. You can almost hear the chairs scraping back. And now this is not part of her prediction. This is a little newsy note. If you see dear Mrs. Equito, one of our other clients, tell her I bring the horoscope myself. One must be so careful these days. These days, apparently, are dangerous days. We'll take a look at the dangerous days next time. See you then.